Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The diagnosis had come to her by chance, or perhaps by fate, during a session with a colleague in Paris. Taylor, a famous psychiatrist, was dealing with a patient when a familiar name appeared in a medical database. Ridge's paperwork, marked for a second opinion, arrived on her desk. The words pancreatic cancer stage 4 had etched themselves into her memory, each syllable a blade. Inoperable. Aggressive. There is limited time. She'd stared at the paper for hours, her professional demeanor eroding as memories of Ridge. His crooked smile, passionate loyalty, and infuriating indecision flooded back. She'd left Paris that night and booked the first flight back to Los Angeles. She couldn't leave him to face this alone, no matter how much history they had. As her taxi approached, the Forrester home loomed ahead, its grandeur contrasting sharply with the delicacy of the news she was carrying. Taylor's hands trembled as she paid the driver, her fingertips touching the edge of the medical paper in her purse. She hadn't called ahead. She hadn't warned anyone, not Brooke, Steffi, or Ridge himself. How could she? How do you inform someone that the man they love is running out of time? The weight of it weighed on her chest, making each step to the front door feel like wading through quicksand. Inside, the house was extremely silent. The familiar aroma of polished wood and fresh flowers welcomed her, but it did little to relieve the knot in her gut. Ridge was standing in the living room, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. He was leaner than she remembered, his broad shoulders still dominating, but his frame revealed a subtle weakness. His brown hair was now stained with gray, and the creases around his eyes revealed signs of stress and sleeplessness. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and his face lit up with that old familiar warmth. "Taylor!" His voice was a blend of surprise and softness, making her heart ache. "What are you doing here?" She wanted to rush to him, wrap her arms around him, and pretend everything wasn't coming apart. But she remained fixed to the spot, clutching her bag like a lifeline. "Ridge, I need to talk to you." "Alone?" His brow furrowed, hearing the heaviness in her voice. He nodded and motioned toward the study. As they walked, Taylor's mind raced. She had prepared this moment 1,000 times on the journey over, but now that he was so close, her words seemed inadequate. The study was cozy, filled with books and memories of a life they had shared. Ridge shut the door behind them, his gaze searching hers. "Doc, what's happening? You appear to have seen a ghost." She swallowed hard, her throat tight. "I was in Paris consulting on a case when your medical file came across my desk, Ridge. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did." Her voice faltered, and she forced herself to meet his gaze. "You've got pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. It's advanced." The air in the room appeared to evaporate. Ridge's expression became still, his eyes narrowing as if he could wish her words away. "No," he answered, nearly whispering. "That is not feasible. I've been fatigued, but—" "Cancer? No, there is a mistake." "There is no mistake," Taylor exclaimed, her voice shaking. She took the report from her bag and held it out to him, her hands quivering. "I double-checked it. Triple-check. Ridge, it's true." He took the paper without looking at it. His hands, the strong, steady hands that had previously sustained her through her worst times, were trembling now. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Months," she whispered, the word wounding her as deep as it did him. "Perhaps 6, maybe fewer." Ridge dropped into a chair, the report dropping from his fingertips to the floor. "While there are therapies and palliative options, it is not curable." He was silent for a moment, with his head bowed. Taylor knelt alongside him, her hand lingering over his before ultimately resting there. His skin felt warm and alive, and it crushed her heart to consider how transient that warmth might be. "I don't know how to do this," he finally admitted, his voice raw. "I'm not sure how to tell Brooke. Or the children. Steffi and Thomas have already lost so much. Eric trailed off, his eyes filled with unshed tears. "You don't have to do it alone," Taylor added, squeezing his hand. "I am here. I will assist you, tell them. I'll get you through this, Ridge, whatever it takes." He really looked at her, and for a moment it was just the two of them, no disease, no history, no obstacles. Taylor and Ridge, just as they had been at the start, when love was easy and the future seemed limitless. But the moment passed, and reality set in. Brooke was the first to know. Taylor persisted on being present when Ridge told her, knowing Brooke's world would shatter just like her own had. They discovered her in the kitchen, her blonde hair catching the afternoon light as she sang quietly, ignorant of the impending storm. Brooke's face collapsed as Ridge spoke with a steady but hollow tone. She reached for him, grasping his shirt as if she could keep him alive through pure willpower. "No," she moaned repeatedly, her tears soaking into his chest. "No, Ridge, no." Taylor stepped back, her heart tearing for the woman who had been both her rival and friend. She wanted to console Brooke, but words seemed ineffective in the face of such pain. The days that followed were a blur of doctor visits, second opinions, and family gatherings. Steffi and Thomas were devastated, their faces pale as they processed the news. Steffi, ever the fighter, requested intensive therapies, experimental trials, and anything that would buy her father more time. Thomas was quieter, his grief visible in the wrinkles on his face as he clung to his father's side. Eric, the patriarch, received the news with stoic grace, but Taylor noticed the shaking in his hands and the terror in his eyes. The Forrester family, which had always been tough, was already cracking under the weight of this loss. Taylor stayed. She relocated to a guest room at the estate, unable to leave Ridge's side. She worked with his doctors, looked into clinical studies, and sat with him through the long hours when pain kept him awake.
They talked, truly talked for the first time in years, about their children, their mistakes, and the love that had endured despite all. Brooke occasionally joined them, and the three of them would sit in a strange, fragile peace, united by their mutual love for Ridge. But the cancer was unrelenting. Ridge's strength decreased, and his vivid vitality faded with each passing week. On good days, he'd chuckle and sketch concepts, confident that he could still operate Forrester creations from his hospital bed. And on bad days, when the pain was so terrible that he couldn't talk, Taylor would hold his hand and murmur stories from their past to help him stay grounded. Ridge asked Taylor to accompany him to the beach one evening as the sun was setting over Los Angeles. It was risky. His physicians had cautioned him not to leave the house, but his eyes contained a quiet determination she couldn't resist. They drove silently, the seaside air carrying the aroma of salt and freedom. Ridge sat in his wheelchair, blanket curled over him, watching the waves crash on the sand. "Do you remember?" he inquired, his voice faint yet friendly. "That summer, we took the kids to Malibu?" Taylor grinned, tears burning her eyes. Steffi was so small, running from the waves, screaming like they were hunting her. And Thomas kept trying to build sandcastles, but Steffi kept knocking them down. Ridge laughed softly, rasping. "She's always been a force, that girl." He reached for Taylor's hand, his grip unexpectedly firm. "Thank you, doctor, for coming back. For everything." She clasped his palm, unable to speak over the knot in her throat. They remained there until the stars appeared, the sound of the waves serving as a gentle reminder that some things would continue. Ridge died 3 weeks later, surrounded by his family. Taylor was there, holding his hand as he took his last breath. Brooke was on his other side, sobbing quietly but relentlessly. Steffi and Thomas stood at the foot of the bed, their expressions filled with anguish. The room was filled with love and sadness, a tapestry of a life that had impacted so many people. Taylor remained in Los Angeles for several weeks afterward. She assisted Brooke in planning the memorial, which was a lovely homage to a guy who had been larger than life. She sat with Steffi through restless nights, listening as her daughter vented her rage and sadness. She hugged Thomas when he sobbed, his guilt for past sins combining with his anguish. And she found herself returning to the beach, where she and Ridge had shared their last sunset, looking for a piece of him in the waves. Life went on, as it always does, but things was different now. The Forrester family was irrevocably affected by the loss of their dad, but his love remained woven into their lives. Taylor, too, had changed. She carried Ridge's memories with her, a bittersweet weight that reminded her of the fleeting nature of time and the lasting power of love. Though her heart bled, she took comfort in knowing she'd been there for him when he needed her the most, a final gesture of loyalty to the man who had given her everything. The town was silent the morning Taylor packed her belongings. Not the quiet that comes with tranquility, but the weighty stillness that feels like a prelude to a storm. She had spent years integrating herself into the rhythms of the place. Coffee at the corner store where the barista knew her name, late-night walks past familiar porches with lights flickering in delicate patterns, neighbors who had become family. But none of that could stop her now. Her heart was heavy, her feet were slower than normal, and she tried to keep a straight face, but the truth was that she was tearing apart within. She left a letter on the small oak table by the window, which Ridge had constructed for her years ago when things between them were softer, kinder, and life seemed safe. The paper's edges curled slightly due to the dampness of her palms. She had altered the phrases several times, but the message remained the same. She had to leave. Ridge had told her, or rather, what she had discovered, was something she couldn't keep with her while she was here. Not when every nook of this land spoke his name, their memories, and their complicated past. She vowed in the letter that she would return, but she had no idea when, and that when she did, she would reveal the secret Ridge had hidden so deeply. Her car was filled with only what she couldn't bear to leave behind: old journals, framed photographs, a scarf her mother had knitted for her, and a music box with a broken hinge that still played half a lullaby. She hesitated as she closed the trunk, her gaze drawn to the road leading out of town. It felt longer than she remembered, as if it knew she'd struggle to take the first step away. She climbed into the driver's seat and muttered farewell, but no one heard her. The path led her past sights that she had once considered permanent parts of her existence. The small diner where she and Ridge had their first awkward date, laughing too hard over burnt pancakes. She used to spend hours at the bookstore, tracing the spines of volumes she never purchased. The old bridge where she used to stand, the night Ridge assured her they'd never hide secrets from each other. She tightened her grasp on the driving wheel as the weight of the memory sank deeper. Promises were frail things. They'd always been. Taylor reflected about the place as she drove further away, and it stung like a bruise she couldn't touch without wincing. People would wonder why she'd left. Some whispered that it was Ridge, but others made up stories of betrayal or longing for another life. She couldn't correct them. She carried the truth alone, and it weighed more than any gossip. Ridge's secret was not only his. It would shatter more than just her heart. It had the potential to tear apart the very fabric of the community that had kept them all together for so long. When night fell, and she was miles from her former home, she parked into a little wayside motel. The room had a faint fragrance of bleach and loneliness. She sat on the bed, staring at the faded flowery curtains, and finally allowed herself to cry. The tears fell silently at first, then in waves that shook her body. She pushed her face into her hands, hoping to block out the recollection of Ridge's voice when he eventually told her the truth. He hadn't intended for her to find out. He had appeared so little, so unlike the guy she had loved for years, as he admitted. She wanted to despise him for it, but the hate wouldn't come. There was just pain, enormous and eternal. Taylor recounted their story from the beginning, as if looking for clues she had overlooked. Ridge remembered how firm and warm her hand felt the first time he grasped it. They spent the nights talking about nothing and everything until the stars went down. The arguments that left them both fatigued, but always returning to each other's embrace. She reflected on the life they had hoped for, which now appeared impossible. If she had known what she knows now, would she have made a different decision? Or was love always a gamble, with the consequences veiled until it was too late? Days blurred into one another as Taylor continued to drive. She went from town to town, never remaining long enough to answer inquiries. She told herself she was looking for clarity and the courage to carry the secret without becoming overwhelmed by it. But the fact was that she was fleeing from the weight of Ridge's eyes in her mind, from the home that no longer felt like hers, and from the parts of herself that had been created on a lie. In the silence of her car, she would talk to him as if he were sitting next to her. She'd ask him why. She begged him to convince her it wasn't true. Despite her desire not to, she would whisper that she missed him. She would dream of his voice, deep and familiar, telling her to come back, forgive him, and remember who they used to be. Every morning, she awoke with the same hollow aching, reminding her that she couldn't go back. Not yet. But she had vowed to return. She clutched that promise as fiercely as she did the driving wheel. One day, she would return to that calm town. One day, she would stroll into the sights that still bore her name. She would reveal what Ridge had hidden, whatever the cost. She wasn't sure if anyone would believe her, or if it would make her a stranger in the area she used to call home. But truth had to be told, even if it meant destroying all else. Seasons changed as Taylor roamed. She saw fall leaves scatter, like parts of her own broken heart, winter snow burying roads in solitude, and spring buds attempting to create something new from what had perished. She learned to deal with absence, but it never got better. She penned letters that she never mailed, the contents gushing out in weak handwriting to Ridge, the community, and herself. Each one ended the same way, "I'll be back." But as time passed, she began to question if she was lying to herself. Did she have the fortitude to confront them again, to look into the eyes of those who had trusted Ridge and her? Could she return knowing that the truth would rip apart their memories just as much as it had hers? She carried the weight of that question with her, heavier than any suitcase and quieter than her nights alone. The secret has not faded. It lingered inside her like a shadow, waiting until the day she could say it aloud. It seemed like it could engulf her before she could. Nonetheless, she stuck to the commitment she made in the letter on the oak table. A promise of return. A vow to deliver the truth. A pledge that, although departing, she had not totally abandoned them. Taylor proceeded on her journey, bringing both pain and hope. Ridge was still grappling with the consequences of what he had done, perhaps wondering if she would ever return, perhaps dreaded the day she did. Somewhere, the town continued to move in its calm rhythms, unaware of the storm looming at its boundaries. Taylor held on to the frail conviction that love, no matter how shattered, might still take her home. Not to the life she once had, but to the truth she could no longer deny. She drove on, the miles extending eternally ahead, her heart broken but unbreakable. The world beyond her window moved and altered, but the secret remained as sharp as glass against her chest. She muttered into the night, not sure if she was talking to Ridge, herself, or the community she had left behind. "I'll be back. I promise." In that muttered vow, she carried both her sadness and her courage, a woman marred by sorrow who refused to be silenced. The trip was long, and the reality was even heavier, but Taylor knew one thing for certain: her narrative would not end. It was just waiting.